My friend, everybody knows the true children of the night come from Transylvania. Oi, you know there are vampires and werewolves in London too, you wanker!
Hello my friends, welcome back to Player Display. I feel like it's been a little while since we reviewed something that's brand spanking new, but finally, I have an entry that I hope is worthy for you guys. I apologize for the wait, but here we have the NECA's Ultimate Lon Chaney as London After Midnight's Professor Burke. Now, this is kind of an odd figure to be releasing, but a very awesome one. If you're looking at the title of this movie, you're like, I've never heard of that, never seen it before, maybe I'll try it out after this review. Well, actually, you can't, because this movie doesn't exist. Somehow, despite all the silent era movies that we have, this one is actually not one that has stood the test of time. It was lost in a fire, and ever since then, we have been on a manhunt for at least one intact copy of this film, but alas, one has never turned up yet. I'm still hoping for the day where one day, someone's great-grandfather passes away, and then their generations upon generations go up into his attic, and they're like, oh, hey, here's an interesting little reel of London After Midnight, and then it gets distributed to the masses or something like that. But until then, all we have is some photo shots and this really awesome action figure. I actually haven't even looked at it yet. I don't know a whole ton about the story, but from what I do know, it's about a professor who disguises himself as a vampire, so this is not actually a vampire in here, but regardless, it's a vampire figure, so you can take for that what you will. But anyhow, let's begin with the box. Over here we have a theatrical poster for the movie, which I have actually never seen before. Of course, you have Lon Chaney, London After Midnight, Ultimate Professor Burke, and I dig this poster. I think it's really badass looking. Same can be said about a lot of the silent era films and the Universal Monster movies. I don't know if this is Universal or not. Let me know in the comments, but anyhow, it looks really cool, so I'm really excited about this one. Off to this side, we have another image of Burke over here, done up in this black and white makeup, and you know that because you can also make out some bloodshot eyes right in there. So this is technically a color version of this character. I know they do black and white versions of the Universal Monsters and stuff like that, but this is a character who is inherently meant to be in black and white, even in a color environment. Off to the side, here he is again, this time without his hat. And off to the back, as NECA usually does, you get a whole bunch of different displaying options for this character. Now, this is going to be an interesting review because I'm not going to be able to unload a whole ton of trivia or backstory on this figure because, again, the film's lost. There's a few summaries out there, but even then they're a little bit clunky. All I can say is that the movie came out to middling reviews, then after that, it was lost in the fire, and all we have is some images and an action figure. So, all that being said, I haven't actually opened this flap yet, so let's do that together. Popping that open. And let's see. Yes, here's another image I was looking forward to seeing. Apparently he has a giant wing piece that you can string to his wrists and his back, perhaps. I'm not totally sure how that works, but we'll find out. And then here is Professor Burke again in his glory with all of his accessories. So we'll have a look at those after we do a quick little unboxing. So, as usual, Betsy over here, so I'm going to make the usual NECA incision on the top of the box, get rid of that little piece of tape, and I think that's all we need to do. NECA's very nice about creating collector-friendly packaging that's not absolutely terrible to open, unlike Todd McFarlane's packaging, of course. This box is actually quite tight. There we go. I almost was convinced that there was another piece of tape, but no, it's just a really tight box. But anyhow, here is the insides. Let's put the box aside. And it looks like they did what they have been doing with a few NECA releases lately, where you get the main bubble up front, but then there is a secondary bubble in the back, and then you just gotta separate them. I imagine with no tape, and all the accessories fell out. But let's get these out of here. We got a ton of hands that just rolled out. We have, ooh, some sexy soft goods. Loving that. And then we got the main figure himself. And wait a second, are there twist ties on here? Did you see that? No twist ties. That's great. I guess we don't need Donny Boy after all. Looks like we got a hat. We got some spare heads. We got the bag that you can absolutely eat and then not have repercussions. And underneath we do have... Oh, all right. We have a little bit of tape here. Give me a second here. And then when you get to the second level of this plastic packaging, you do get the wing rig, which feels really interesting. It's like a rubbery plastic. I was wrong. We are going to need Donny Boy after all, because there are some twist ties for this individual component over here. But I've got everything out. I'm going to have a little bit of playtime, and then we'll get on with a review. Alright, so here we are with Lon Chaney Sr., the man of 1,000 faces, portraying Professor Burke, the character who has never been seen on film by everyone who is currently living. But anyhow, we do have a really beautiful and interesting figure here. First thing we'll do is, straight off the bat, we can take this figure out of the packaging. He comes with this overcoat, which looks really awesome. I love how well sculpted it is. We're actually going to remove it for the sake of this review, but I suppose we'll eyeball this accessory a little early on. You can see he's got a little bit of a collar going around the neck. He also got some buttons, and then the holes for said buttons, which is very nice. And I love how naturally it drapes down. It feels very convincing, and I think it's just a very beautiful piece to accompany this figure and just give him a little bit more of a silhouette. However, if you prefer soft goods, they actually included a substitute, which, if you know me and my reviews, I am a soft goods guy. I usually prefer cloth over plastic, but in this case, I actually prefer the solid one. So, as you can see here, actually, we'll put them side by side. We have the collar that's consistent between the two, but then right below it, you either get a continuation of the plastic, or you get this almost cheeseclothy material. I'll admit that NECA's done a better job with soft goods than this. Like, I feel like Dracula's cape had a little bit more volume. You had the Phantom of the Opera's cloak, which had wiring in it. And this one, it kind of is just a little bit loosey-goosey. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's kind of just draping, and not in a good way. But you can slide this onto his neck. With a little issue, you just got to get it past the hair. And when you do that, it looks okay, I suppose. I definitely prefer this one here, though. I like it when it already has a mapped out silhouette. But if you want to have a lot more articulation going on, then you might actually prefer this. Actually, when you do articulate it, it does look a little bit better. In fact, if you get it to fold a little bit, and it looks a little nicer and a little bit bat-like. So, yeah, it's not terrible. I mean, it's still got its purposes when you finick around with it. Actually, that's pose right there. Sometimes you're fiddling around with it and you pose it well without even trying. But anyhow, let's get both cloaks out of the way so we can look at this figure as he came out of the box. So let's first look at this very awesome looking head sculpt, one of 3. Something I wanted to note is there is this paint rub on the forehead, which is not on the other figure, so it's certainly not intentional. I was initially thinking, oh, maybe he had the hat on him when I was pulling out of the box. Oh, you know what? Yeah, so here's the bubble that he came in. The hat was initially on this head sculpt inside the packaging. So that's why we have a little bit of that black rub up there. So I don't know, maybe if I hit it with my finger a little bit, will come off. Not really. Maybe with a little bit of a rinse it will come off in time, but I don't know. It's a little unfortunate that they packed it that way. I've seen it with figures like that before, like with the Amazon Emperor Palpatine. I remember he had the hood on, and even the hood caused a little bit of black aftermath residue on top of his head. So we're seeing the same issue here with him and his hat. We'll get back to the hat later, but I mean, if you want him with the hat on anyways, then they're just going to hide it. So it's really not a big deal, but really nice hat too. Well, again, we'll discuss that in a few moments here, but aside from that, it's a very beautiful looking head sculpt. I love that it feels like a guy wearing makeup. Again, this is technically a colorized version of this character, and that is made all the more apparent when you look at the eyes and the mouth. So you have Lon Chaney with black and white makeup, and then you've got the more organic bits of his face peeking from underneath. And I love how that adds to the shock value of this profile. Just makes him a little bit more creepy and intimidating, especially when you tilt him up a little bit. Makes him feel very ghastly. I really love that. He also has some false sharp teeth. I love how it's not the traditional 2 fangs. Instead, all the teeth are sharp. I'm just noticing that now. I think that's really cool. Up here, you have a slightly balding head, and then you can spin him around. You got some short, stocky locks, and they're painted in really well. In the photo shots from this movie, which again, I have no idea how they exist, if the actual film itself is destroyed, sometimes you see him with dark hair, sometimes he has lighter hair. I don't know, maybe at times he's wearing a wig. I'm not sure what the story is behind that, but then again, I can't watch the film and tell you. Now let's look at the rest of this figure. We have a beautiful white tie over here. Also got technically 3 layers of clothing if you count the jacket, well, whichever jacket you choose. Then you got an undercoat, Then you got a vest under there. Then you got another coat. So each just got a lot of layers going on, but they lie down beautifully. I mean, each one's got their own set of buttons, and they got the parting in the middle. It's just very beautiful, very convincing. I mean, I think NECA has done a very good job at presenting us with figures which have clothing that are not done with soft goods, but they've mastered the art of getting the wrinkles down so they look realistic, and they give them, especially for this character here, very best exemplified, this almost shiny, not quite matte texture that gives him a leather or pleather feel. So I just think it looks fantastic. I mean, it's solid plastic, but it still feels like it's a bendable material. I mean, yeah, it's got bend to it, of course, but, you know, like a leather or a fabric or something along those lines, it just feels very realistic. Again, one of the reasons why NECA is my favorite toy line of all time. But anyhow, let's also have a look at the arms, continuing with those beautifully sculpted details that we see on the jacket, with that not quite black, more of a gray, that's just a hair on the shiny side, which I love. Down here are the hands, nothing fancy going on, just some bare hands that are a little bit more on the pale side, as they should be, in correspondence with the face up here. Down here, you've got a continuation of one of his many tunics, going down to some dress pants, very similar to Phantom of the Opera, I suppose. It seems that a lot of the Universal monsters we've been looking at have had, like, dress pants or a nice clean-cut suit or something like that. I guess back then, since everyone was wearing one of two outfit options that they had available at the time, that's represented in the films. I mean, everyone's kind of just wearing the same old goddamn thing. But anyhow, when we have it presented in plastic form, it looks absolutely fantastic. Down here, got some really nice dress shoes and a nice polished black, and they are very, very shiny, and I like them a lot. So anyhow, that is the main figure. Let's go on to accessories, because there is a lot of accessories. We've already discussed the two overcoats over here, but just for the sake of review, we got the soft goods variant and we got the solid one. Again, I prefer the solid one, but if you prefer articulation, you might want to go for the soft goods one a little bit. It might actually help to crinkle it up and give it a little bit of weathering, but really up to you. I mean, you got two options, so if you destroy this one, you can swap to the other if you wish. You also have a lantern over here. I really love when we get generic pedestrian accessories, if I may call it that, because that means you can use them on any figures you want. I feel like this wouldn't be out of place at Carfax Abbey with Bela Lugosi's Dracula, or maybe even with Nosferatu, Count Orlok. I just love props like this that can go with any character. Very beautifully detailed. I love the yellow. It feels like it's got a glow to it. I feel like the silver application on those bars, or whatever you want to call them, could have been a little bit stronger, but it still looks great. And I'm sure he'll have a hand with which he can hold this. So very nice. You also have his top hat looking really good. I was at an antique shop recently and I saw a hat that looked just like this. I'm kind of regretting not picking it up, but then again, it was $150, so maybe that's a good thing. But I'll stick with Professor Burke for $40. But anyhow, it looks great. It's got a little bit of texture work to it. It feels like it's got some grit. We are zoomed in as much as we can be, but you can see it's not totally smooth. It's got some texturing. Also got this nice shiny leather band going around, and underneath it, nothing much to see. Just a big old open hole in there. So it's probably compatible with all the head sculpts, I suspect. Speaking of head sculpts, you'll look at those as well. The initial one that we had, got this big ol' stark, grinning, perhaps laughing face over here. Next one we have is a little bit more relaxed, still having a good old time, but a little bit dreary-eyed. Maybe he's getting a little bit tired. And then over here we have another expression that's kind of a balance between both. I mean, if we get all three over here, let's have a peek. We have, I mean, he is the man of 1,000 faces, right? We got the more squinty-eyed over here, got more wide-eyed and looking straight on, but the mouth is a little more closed. Then we have one that's looking a little bit more down with a wide-open mouth. So really nice options here. I love that NECA gives us alternate portraits, because not all action figure lines do that. Todd! Then we also have 3 additional hands. He comes with 2 open hands by default, but we also have what could be a more gesturing righty over here. It looks like it could be pointing, absolutely, looking very nice. And I suspect you could hold the lantern with this. Oh, I just noticed something. We got a split in the lantern right there. That is definitely not intentional, so I'll need to fix that, but we can just use friction right now to demonstrate it. But yeah, you can dangle it right there. I'll fix it with a little glue. I'm not crying over that. You have some other hands here. You got one that's a little bit more gripping. This is probably better suited for the lantern. If he's holding it off to the side right there. It's a nice generic hand. As for the material, it's very stiff. Not a lot of malleability in there. So if you want to fit something in there, might pay off to have some hot water nearby or something like that. And once again, this is a righty. And then over here, we have his only alternate lefty hand, and it's kind of similar to the other pointing hand we had before. They both are kind of pointing at you. That's kind of fun, actually. So you have another alternate pointing hand for whatever reason, or just be relaxed at the side, whatever you want. So yeah, we got 3 nice alternate hands for a variety of posing options. And the last thing we have, as we kind of looked at before, is this big old cape batwing wire work thing. I'm not sure what you'd call it, but it's definitely made of a much softer material, borderline rubber. It's really floppy, but I really love the translucency that it has to it. You can see my fingers poking out from behind. It's beautiful. I mean, it's done in a gray. It's got some wrinkles on it. It's got like these lines going down. I'm not sure what the anatomical term is, but it looks very bat-like, and I really love that. So that being said, let me try doing some accessory swaps here. So firstly, let's pop this head off and see how easy that is. I'm sure it's going to be pretty simple. Yeah, NECA's pretty good with heads. And we'll go with this head sculpt over here. Why not? But before we do that, let's get these arms and spread them out so you can attempt to put on the wing rig. I'm going to do this live with no cuts, just so you can see how long or short of a process this is. I suspect it won't be too difficult. It's just going to be a little bit tedious with all the different parts you got to take off, put back on. But yeah, it looks like you just need to get this ring over here, put over the neck, and then you need to get some hands. So let's go with the pointing hands, why not? And then we'll pop those on. This wing accessory is really cool and all. I just don't prefer accessories that demand one very specific posing option from the figure. I like accessories where you could do multiple things with them. Like with the lantern, it could be in his left or right hand. It could be up high or up low, like he's searching the London alleyways or something like that. But here, his hands absolutely need to be up in this position. So really up to you whether you prefer to display it with him or not. But personally, I like things that give him a little bit more of that play factor. You know what I mean? So anyhow, let's pull that down a little bit. Here we have one of his head sculpts. Oh, we are going with this one. Excuse me, like it matters. But we can pop that on. And yeah, it holds in pretty damn well. Let's see how he stands with it, because that I'm definitely not sure of. Makes him a little bit tipsy, so you're going to want to be careful with that. Let's see, right there. You can see he is leaning back a little bit, so it might be nice to have like a McFarlane figure stand or something along those lines if you choose to use this rig. It is quite heavy, but again, not quite my preference. Although if you wanted to, you could take the hat and pop it on his head. And as I suspected, it's compatible with all the heads. And I'm definitely going to have the hat on at all times, except for now, when I'm taking everything back apart so we can do some articulation. But anyhow, let's move right into that. Here he is again with his other third head over here as we move on to the movement of this figure, which I suspect is going to be incredible, because NECA always is. But we have not much down, not much up, got some tilt, very good actually, and you also have some swivel. You could probably go 360, but then the hair would get stuck, and who needs to do that? It's not rig, and it doesn't need to do an exorcist, so that's fine. My fridge is getting noisy, ignore that. As for arms, they come out to a pretty much 90, a little bit further actually, but if you want to be doing like a big wide open vampire pose that's more compatible with the wing rig that we saw, you could probably just flip that joint upside down and get them a little higher if you wish, and that would look pretty cool. As for elbows, we have a 90, I think. Yeah, a 90 and a swivel. All the wrists swivel and hinge in and out, I believe. Yes, they do. As for the torso, I suspect because he has all this clothing, we won't be getting much, but I'm sure we could find that there is a swivel in there or a ball joint. As for crunching forward and back, ooh, did I break something? No, okay, good. Freaks me out a little bit. You can go forward a little bit, and he can go back a tad as well, so that's something for you. As for legs, they can kick a little bit forward. It gets a little stuck between the NECA diaper and then the coat and then the other coat. So he's not a character that's meant to be very dynamic, so that's not a huge deal. As for the knees, they articulate to not quite 90. It gets close, though. As for the ankles, they should have a swivel, a little squeaky, but it's there. You have a tad back, a better amount forward, and you also got some squeaky rocker. So, very gorgeous figure. Not a crazy amount of articulation, but again, it's a classic, well, quote-unquote, classic movie monster who at least has a cult following, so he doesn't need to move a whole ton. But yeah, great addition to the vampire shelf. I love him a lot. Now, before we get into size comparisons, I actually want to demonstrate that you can actually get the solid overcoat on him, and you can still move the arms around a fair deal. So it does allow for some leeway so the arms can stretch out a little bit more. So if you prefer the look of the coat and you want it to be the plastic variant and a little bit more stretchy, then you have that. So it's great that you have this option. But again, if you don't prefer this look, got the soft goods one, it can definitely move him a little bit further with that, as opposed to this one potentially popping off. But you still get a lot of movement with it, so that's really great to see. But anyhow, let's do some size comparisons. I'm just going to bring everybody in. Here we have Ultimate Nosferatu, and then we have Ultimate Dracula, and then we have Ultimate Phantom of the Opera, who is also portrayed by Lon Chaney Sr. And this is a great gaggle of gothic freaks. I really love these guys together. Of course, there are so many other Universal monsters that we've covered on this channel who I'm not bringing out for size comparisons right now, but he definitely adds to the dark cloaked brooding type of figures that pretty much prevails throughout that collection. So he's just a really great addition. And looking across these, it looks like he's a little bit on the shorter side. Then again, everyone's got a figure stand out under them except for him. But yeah, he's a little shorter than Bela Lugosi, and then also the Phantom, who has a little bit of a 5 head going on, and Nosferatu is definitely taller than him, especially if you exclude the hat. In fact, I'll take that off. And you can see he is a little bit short, so I like that size difference. I don't know how they suddenly made Lon Chaney Sr. so much taller here. I think it's because of his shoes. Yeah, because when you look down here, he's got some high heels going on there. That's right, I forgot when we covered that. But yeah, it's interesting. He's got some platformers, so that's why he's a little taller here than he is here as Professor Burke. And lastly, of course, we have our Star Wars Black series, Mecha Muck!
Another goddamn vampire? I'm getting freaking sick of this place!
Quiet, you! I'm a professor in disguise, you blue muppet!
Hey, words hurt more than garlic sometimes,
This is an absolutely awesome NECA figure. Definitely a conversation starter, particularly because nobody knows who the hell he is, at least the average moviegoer. He's definitely one of those creatures, not really a creature, again, it's a man in a vampire disguise, who's kind of got a cult following, who's still not very well known, and of course you can't watch the movie that he comes from, so he's just really interesting to talk about, and he's also got a really cool design to boot. I love that he's got the top hat. I love the lantern that he comes with. The wings, even though they're not my preference, it definitely gives him a very unique profile. And he's also got the traditional black and white garb that you'd see with most of the Universal monster figures. So he blends right in and he doesn't feel out of place at all. And also you got another Lon Chaney Sr., and there's never anything wrong with getting another Lon Chaney on your shelf, whether it be a senior or a junior. And as for the functionality of this figure, I love the accessories. I had absolutely no issues popping anything on or off. No QC issues, except for a little bit of that paint rub on the top of this particular head sculpt with the hat, and also that broken grip on the lantern, but that's probably not NECA's fault. I was a little bit rough when opening this packaging, so it could have hit the table a little bit and snapped apart, but that's an easy fix, so not even worried about that. And then, even went out of their way to give you additional overcoats, so I know I keep mentioning that, but that's just a great detail, and a great example of why NECA is so goddamn great. I went on a whole rant about that with the Phantom, but I mean, they're hitting it on the nose every single time. They're doing a beautiful job with niche characters, popular characters, virtually unknown and almost lost to time characters. I really love how we almost have a vampire trinity now in NECA. We've got Bela Lugosi being your classic, we had our Nosferatu being your unlicensed, and then we've got Professor Burke being your unknown. So, I don't know, that's how I like to think about it. So, very great, unique figure for your shelf. Highly recommend them. Not the most accessible. I noticed that pre-orders are gone. I'm not sure if he's in stock again or not. I'd have to check. They're sold out on BBTS last I checked. But if you're ever able to come across him, I do highly recommend him. He's such a unique experience. So if you get your hands on him, I really hope you enjoy him. So anyhow, if you enjoyed this review, then please, as per usual, be sure to
like, comment,
Ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals. And subscribe.
This is the editor speaking, humbly reminding you to support the pod Patreon in the description to guarantee new content every single week.
Thank you guys very much for watching. Rock on, and I will see you all later.